Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll also share a little something about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is his divine appearance day. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 10, Chapter 2, which is entitled Prayers by the Demigods. And we're reading text 15. So 10 to 15. Garbe pranite devakya rohinim yoga nidraya aho vishram situ garba iti pora vichukrushu. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When the child of Devaki was attracted and transferred into the womb of Rohini by Yogamaya, Devaki seemed to have a miscarriage. Thus all the inhabitants of the palace loudly lamented, "Alas, Devaki has lost her child." Purport. All the inhabitants of the palace includes Kamsa. When everyone lamented, Kamsa joined in compassion, thinking that perhaps because of drugs or some other external means, Devaki had undergone this abortion. The real story of what happened after Yogamaya attracted the child of Devaki into the womb of Rohini in the 7th month of Rohini's pregnancy is described as follows in the Hari Vamsa. At midnight, while Rohini was deeply sleeping, she experienced, as if in a dream, that she had undergone a miscarriage. After some time, when she awoke, she saw that this had indeed happened, and she was in great anxiety. But Yogamaya then informed her, "O auspicious lady, your child is now being replaced. I am attracting a child from the womb of Devaki, and therefore your child will be known as Sankarsana." The word Yoga Nidra is significant. When one is spiritually reconnected through self-realization, one regards his material life as having been like a dream. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 69, Yanisha sarvabhutanam tasyam jagarti samyayam yasyam jagrati bhutani sanisha pashyato mune. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. The stage of self-realization is called Yoga Nidra. All material activities appear to be a dream when one is spiritually awakened. Thus, Yoga Nidra may be explained to be Yoga Maya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Vidati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Vaganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinobandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Adi Purush Prabhu, Arjuna Prabhu ask for your blessings, that we can say something that is pleasing as Shri Radha Mulidhar, Shri Gaurachandra. May our words be aligned with Guru Parampara. May the devotees be benefited by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam together. Hare Krishna. So again, this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 2, entitled Prayers by the Demigods, Text 15. When the child of Devaki was attracted and transferred into the womb of Rohini by Yoga Maya, Devaki seemed to have a miscarriage. Thus all the inhabitants of the palace loudly lamented, "Alas, Devaki has lost her child." Today is the supremely auspicious day of Gaur Pranim. By the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we can have an opportunity today to hear and chant the glories of the birth and the activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're going to hear about his birth today. Here, we're also hearing about the birth of Krishna, the advent of Krishna. This is the section. And also the birth of Balaram in this verse. So many births. Janma karma chime divyam. That if we can understand the truth about these births of Krishna, of Lord Chaitanya, of Balaram, if we understand them in truth, then the Bhagavad Gita says, Tyaktva deham punar janma. Then we no longer have to take birth. If we can understand how it is that God takes birth in this world. His abode is timeless. And at some point he breaks into time and into this material world and takes birth. And Parikshit, therefore, is eager to hear about the birth of Krishna. He encourages Shukadev Goswami. He asks him questions. And Shukadev Goswami is very grateful to respond to those questions. He also wants to speak about Krishna's birth. And he tells Parikshit, Dukkha shoka tamonudam, anugrahaya bhaktanam, which means that the devotees, they realize the mercy contained in hearing the story of the birth of the Supreme Lord. They realize the mercy that's there. And dukkha shoka tamonudam, just hearing about Krishna's birth removes distress, removes lamentation, shoka, removes darkness. Just by hearing nicely the pastimes of the Lord, this is what happens internally. And we're hearing also in this section how Krishna's birth is quite dramatic. You know, his parents are chained in a prison. Kamsa has already killed 6 children. And Kamsa knows the 8th child will kill him. And so now in today's verse, we're at the 7th child. So 6 have been killed. And now the 7th child is coming. And it's a very mysterious occurrence, right? It says here, it seems to be a miscarriage. Why all this drama? Why does Krishna make it so dramatic, his birth? miscarriage and death and all these things are happening. There's a verse that explains. It says, Nahyasya janmano hetu. What is the reason that the birth unfolds in this way for Krishna and for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu too? Also, there are many dramatic things happening in that story. So this verse says, Janmano, the birth, na hetu. There's no cause. There's no cause for the way the birth unfolds. What does that mean? It means it's simply happening this way because it's Krishna's sweet will. It's just his will. By these activities, they're mysterious, they're interesting. He fascinates us and draws us in to hear. He draws us in to the story. So this is what Krishna is doing, and we understand in the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as well. Lord Chaitanya, his birth and activities sort of parallel Lord Krishna, because it's Krishna in a different form, and so it also unfolds sometimes in a similar way. And with his birth, Mother Sachi also, the first 8 children, 8 daughters, passed away just after being born. And so Mother Sachi and Jagannath Mishra, they began to pray sincerely that the next child would survive. They prayed for a son to Vishnu. And that next child was Vishwarup, the older brother of Lord Chaitanya. And then finally, in the womb, the 10th child was to be Lord Chaitanya. And it was also dramatic because 9 months had passed, but still no birth. 10 months, 11 months, 12 months, 13 months, and still there was no birth yet. So the parents became very concerned, of course, and they went to Nilambar Chakravarti, who was the father of Sachi Devi and a great astrologer, to try to understand what was happening, what will happen. And he assured them, don't worry, there's the greatest of personalities is within your womb and will soon take birth. He's just waiting for the right opportune moment. And he's waiting for the most auspicious moment. And it's interesting because that was the lunar eclipse. He was waiting for the lunar eclipse, which is considered inauspicious. In India, even in Vrindavan, sometimes temples are closed on the lunar eclipse. And people cover the windows in their homes to prevent that energy coming into their homes, to prevent it on that day. But because it's inauspicious, everyone goes to the holy river. Everyone goes to the holy river and they submerge themselves and they chant the name Hari, Hari. They're chanting, they're taking shelter of Krishna's name. This name Hari. It's said in one place that a person has learned and mastered all the Vedas if they're devoutly uttering the 2 syllables, Hari, Hari. If you just utter those 2 syllables, it's said that one has actually mastered the Vedic literature. And so everybody would come together and so Lord Chaitanya arranged it so that he would take birth just at that moment when everybody is chanting the name of God, because that was the essence of his mission, to reignite the power in chanting the name of Krishna. And so he appeared in that way. So also a dramatic birth. And here we're hearing about Lord Balaram, his birth. it's amazing. We want to understand the birth, because the Bhagavad Gita says by understanding it properly, we no longer take birth in this material world. By absorbing our minds in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, we are lifted out of material consciousness. And there's no need, therefore, to take another material birth, because what causes material birth is material consciousness. So there has to be a shift, a change in consciousness, a purifying of our consciousness by hearing, by chanting, by associating with devotees. So Krishna, he appears along with his divine energies. And those divine energies are personified. You know, you just imagine there are various energies of the Lord, but they're personified, they're personalities. So we're hearing about Lord Balaram. He's the seventh child. And this is also an energy of the Lord. There's also a principle behind Lord Balaram. He's actually considered to be the Svayam Prakash, and he is the principle of the Guru. He represents that principle, Guru Tattva. He's Samasti Guru. And this is how, you know, Krishna arranges it. It's very interesting. First comes this principle, comes first before Krishna appears. Even in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, again, they parallel Krishna's pastimes in some ways. So Vishwarup is also said to be non-different from Balaram, from Lord Nityananda. And he also came first, right? The older brother. And then after Balaram comes, we're hearing a little bit of this in the purport as well. So that's the brother of Krishna. And then who's his sister? Another one of his divine energies. Yogamaya. The Yogamaya energy also will take birth from Yashoda. So Yogamaya, she's the Shakti Tattva of the Lord. The Shakti Tattva. There's a nice verse I wanted to read about Yogamaya, since she's also mentioned here. This is just going back one chapter, and an explanation is given. So this is chapter 1 of this canto, text 25. It says, the potency of the Lord, known as Vishnu Maya, who is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will also appear with Lord Krishna. This potency, acting in different capacities, captivates all the worlds, both material and spiritual. At the request of her master, she will appear with her different potencies in order to execute the work of the Lord. And so Yogamaya also is coming very soon. Krishna arranges it this way. His brother comes, his sister. And who's his brother and sister? These very special energy, his energies manifesting. And they're persons, which means there's relationship, there's intimacy. This is the spiritual world. It's quite amazing. So today's verse, you know, this is mistaken to be a miscarriage, but actually it's all taking place by the arrangement of Krishna and Yogamaya together. That's what we heard earlier. Right? It says in the purport here, this is really what's happening. It just looks like, oh, there's a miscarriage, things are unfolding this way or that way, but there's a very specific plan that was arranged. And this is revealed in this purport and explained in the Harivamsha. At midnight, while Rohini was deeply sleeping, she experienced, as if in a dream, that she had undergone a miscarriage. After some time, when she awoke, she saw that this had indeed happened, and she was in great anxiety. But Yogamaya then informed her, "O auspicious lady, your child is now being replaced. I'm attracting a child from the womb of Devaki, and therefore your child will be known as Sankarshan." So this is an arrangement. Yogamaya makes arrangements for the Lord. And so she's also preparing things for the birth of Krishna, just as he wants. And then this point is mentioned about Yoga Nidra. When one is spiritually reconnected through self-realization, one regards his material life as having been like a dream. This is an analogy we see again and again in the Bhagavatam, that this material life is like a dream. And if you think about it, when you dream at night, we dream at night. And because of identification with that dream, sometimes we're happy because of what's happening. Sometimes we're fearful in a dream. Sometimes we're agitated. And what causes all of that is the identification with the dream. So that's a very good analogy, because when we wake up spiritually in this life, we'll also have that same realization. When you dream at night and there's some agitation or some fear, and suddenly you wake up and you think, oh, it wasn't actually happening to me. I'm okay. It wasn't actually happening to me. In the same way, when one awakens spiritually, and all the occurrences in material life and all the drama of material life, one can also understand it's not actually happening to me. I'm a pure spiritual being. I'm part and parcel of God. I'm always under the shelter of God, in actuality. So one begins to see it as a dream, material life. It doesn't mean we become careless or irresponsible, knowing that it's dreamlike. We go on with our responsibilities and our duties, but we no longer believe in material life as the complete reality. We want to be less identified with this material world, because the more we're identified with bodies, people, places, things, the more confusion that will be in our minds, the more pain, the more reactiveness, the more forgetfulness. And the less identified we are with those things, then the more calm, the more centered, the more wise, and also we'll have more energy. We'll have more energy. How do you get more energy in this life? It's by identifying less with everything that's happening around us, actually. If we're fully identified with it all, this is happening right now, and we get into it. I'm feeling this way right now, and I get into it. Then it's difficult to see truth. It's difficult to see the message that's contained in life, messages that are always coming to us. Material life is also teaching us so many things. Because our minds are agitated and restless, we don't catch those teachings. We don't see, because of identification is too strong. So the true identification, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. We just have to deeply embrace that and live that way. Remember that. And then everything, realizations will come, understanding comes. Mercy comes, because now we're situated properly. We can't pretend to be, identified with the pure soul. We know we're identified with this mind and body, but there's a gradual awakening from that dream. It's a dream. This body will change very soon. The mind will also change very soon. The mind changes, even in this life, is changing constantly. So, becoming less identified And even before that spiritual awakening, we can understand that we live in two worlds right now. Even before a person awakens spiritually, there's the external world of, you know, uh, trees and land and objects and people outside of us. Everything is revealed by our external senses. But there's also the inner world, our inner world. What's there? Thoughts, imagination, ego, desires, impressions. This is the inner world. Will. And actually, the inner world is more real than the outer world. It's more substantial. It's more consequential. Everything happening externally is actually coming from the subtle world, the world of the mind, impressions, desires, thoughts. So it's actually the inner world is more real than our outer world. Even though, you pick up an object, you think this is a true hard fact. This table, this rock, that's reality. But actually that's less real than what's happening internally. The internal world is it's the mulam, it's like the root, the unseen root that's causing everything else externally. Just like, for example, war. War takes place in this world. There are wars happening now. There's always some wars. And wars are first born and raised in the subtle body of men and women. Every time people collectively indulge in hate or indulge in envy or indulge in revenge, when people collectively begin to do that, it's like we're preparing, we're subtly preparing ourselves for this explosion of war to take place on the physical plane. It's like adding fuel. You keep adding, all these people are adding fuel in a huge space by indulging in anger. We should see the power of this. When my mind, even though I'm aloof from any kind of war, but in my mind, if I'm indulging in revenge and hatred, I'm adding fuel to a particular space. And everyone's collectively adding fuel to this space. And then finally, at some point, someone comes along and strikes the match. And then there's an explosion, and then there's a raging fire. It looks like it came suddenly, but it's never sudden. It all begins internally first. And when a group of people also begin to cultivate that together, they hate another group or whatever it may be, then it's like it's a preparation for finally that somebody's going to come, some person's going to come and strike a match, and the whole thing is going to light up, and there's going to be a fire. So this is how wars actually begin. Like everything else happening in our material world, it originates from the inner world of a person and of people, and it's maintained there as well. So until we understand this and face this very basic fact, wars are inevitable. And the answer to no real problem can ever be found or solved in the outer world. There's a verse I wanted to read about this. If we're looking for, the real cause of things and the real answer, the real solution to anything happening in the material world, it's a mistake to think we'll find that solution in the material world. It's actually not there. It doesn't exist there. I wanted to read a couple verses from the 4th canto in this regard. This is the 4th canto, 29th chapter, text 32. This says the living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence, other living entities, or the body and mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature despite all attempts to counter these laws. Next verse. A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. This is so powerful for us to meditate on. Any problem in this material world, if we're solving it in a material way, it's just putting the burden somewhere else. It never really removes the burden. And then this next verse, these are teachings of Narada Muni. And this next verse also connects us to what we're talking about in terms of the dream. So Narada Muni continues. No one can counteract the effects of fruitive activity simply by manufacturing a different activity devoid of Krishna consciousness. All such activity is due to our ignorance. When we have a troublesome dream, we cannot relieve it with a troublesome hallucination. One can counteract a dream only by awaking. Similarly, our material existence is due to our ignorance and illusion. Unless we awaken to Krishna consciousness, we cannot be relieved of such dreams. For the ultimate solution to all problems, we must awaken to Krishna consciousness. So the real solution to all of these issues is to do what all of us are trying to do, to awaken spiritually. And then from that position, from that consciousness, and imagine if a group of people collectively awaken spiritually, awaken to Krishna consciousness. Imagine what good can be done in the world by those people who have vision, who have compassion. We just try to tell each other to be compassionate. There's no power in that. Be compassionate, be loving, be wise. You can't snap your finger and just be those things. You know, you need more education. People need more education, and then we'll be better. Oh, if we could just learn from our mistakes. That never works. That never has worked. We need actually the purification of consciousness. And there's a scientific process for that. It can't be just a random sentiment or desire to be better, to be nice, to stop hating. So any solution we try to make without undergoing the transformation of consciousness just places the burden from the head, Narada Muni says, to the shoulder. You know, you carry something on your head. It gets very heavy, feels like a burden. Let me move it. Oh, there's some relief now. I moved it from my head to my shoulder. But then as time passes, now it's heavy. Now let me move it to the other shoulder. And again, that becomes a burden. You're never letting go of the burden. So, and then just hear these pastimes. Just recognize the contrast from this world that we live in, the world of war. But there's another world. There's the world of divine love. We're hearing about that in these verses, and today being such a special day to absorb our consciousness in these beautiful pastimes. You know, there's a world of divine compassion. This is the eternal world of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where he is exchanging pastimes, activities with his devotees. And what is it? There's also a drama. There's also a drama within Krishna's pastimes, but it's really the flow of rasa. It's a dynamic flow of rasa, of these pure relationships, divine sentiments, divine thoughts, divine activities. And that state of life is called Krishna consciousness. That state of life is called pure devotional service. And the living being has a choice. Which world do we want to be in? Now, it doesn't mean we have to leave this material world either. It just means our consciousness has to enter in to this higher world. And then we may still remain in this material world, but now we see differently, we feel differently, we know the truth. We can be instruments of compassion, instruments of true change. So it's a wonderful day to reflect. If we absorb our minds and our consciousness nicely in hearing about the birth of Chaitanya, the birth of Krishna, today's verse, the birth of Balaram, there's a great mystery in these births. There's a great mystery, and one, if we understand it properly. What's to understand? It's all a manifestation of God's compassion in this world. This is why he takes birth in this way. This is why he draws us into what's happening in this story. It's turning our consciousness back to the Lord. Cheto darpana marginal. But the consciousness starts to become purified by hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna, of Lord Chaitanya. Purification begins to take place. So today, let's take the opportunity to listen very carefully, to chant in the association of devotees, and know that this is the true antidote to all of the problems in our world. It may seem like, it's hard for us to accept that sometimes. Well, so many things are happening. I have to get busy and help in so many ways, and we have to be practical. And of course, we can do those things. But we should also know and not be fooled and not believe that by simply material involvement or material effort on my side, I may have to do something in the moment. Something is needed. But we should know that the real change, the real antidote, is the purification of my consciousness in hearing and chanting, associating with devotees, taking shelter in prayer, taking shelter of the Lord, chanting the Lord's name. This makes a change from within us. And then naturally, when that change is happening, compassion is growing in the heart, and we want to also be involved in everything external to do good. And then it'll actually have some power to do good. And it won't be just moving the burden from one shoulder to the other shoulder. So we can take shelter of the most merciful incarnation of the Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Today is called Gaur Pranim. It is his appearance day. And he has come into this world so mercifully. Again, born the way he's born. We should hear today about how he was born and see the similarities, since we're reading the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. The similarities, Krishna's birth, Lord Chaitanya's birth. Hear attentively and absorb our minds in that. And then our minds are gradually getting purified. So this is the whole purpose of being a human being. Purifying the mind so that we have access to the transcendental energy. When the mind is purified, it becomes compatible with the pastimes of the Lord. It becomes receptive. When the mind is purified, then the chanting, hearing the name, hearing these stories, these pastimes, it's not just entertaining, but it's the very life of the soul. So I'll stop here. I wanted to leave some time if there are any thoughts, comments, or questions, because it's a very special day, and I'd love to hear from anyone else if they have some reflections on this day or anything you may have. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I ask you a question?
Hi, Gail. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes.
In the beginning, you said something like, if we identify less with the body, we get more in energy. Do you remember saying something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, so can you explain that?
Well, just imagine, when you watch television or some news or something like that, what's happening? You're identifying. Say you're fully identified everything that's happening in the world and all the drama. What does that do to a person? The identification itself depletes us. All day long, say, you go to work and your boss is just angry at you. And now you're just in your head because of that. And you're dwelling on it. You're identified with it. You're absorbed in it. And then we're up and then we're down. Now my life is good. I'm really happy. I'm excited. And then now something went wrong. I'm back down. And this up and down, the cause of it is identification. And so if we can actually be less identified and just centered, actually these things, they have their importance, but it's not the ultimate importance. We're less identified. And that way we're actually we're conserving energy. We're keeping the energy in for something more important, which should be devotional service to the Lord, hearing and chanting. That's, if we find that we don't have energy for those things, that means we're too identified with material things. And so when you are less identified with all the drama and craziness of life, you'll find yourself having more strength, more energy for what's most essential. Does that make sense, Gal?
It sounded more like we have more time for other things if we're less absorbed. Well, for one thing, when you say we're identifying more with, like, say, the things in the news or what our boss said to us, that sounds more like, we're absorbed. Our mind is absorbed in that, or we're absorbed in the mind. But if we're not absorbed in those things, it just sounds like, well, if we're not absorbed in those things, then we just have more time to be absorbed in Krishna conscious things.
Yeah.
Rather than more energy, I'm saying.
Well, the word identification is good even for those things, like when things are happening, because we think that these things are happening to me.
Yes.
So like when, again, an example, like in your life, just say all kinds of things are going wrong and there's issues with family and there's just some stressful situation. To be identified means that it's happening to me, it's overwhelming me, I'm disturbed, now I'm glad, now I'm excited. So this is also identification.
Yes.
And because of that identification, we do lose energy. We lose time too, but just think about what it does to your mind. If that was, all day long, everything that walks by you, you get into it, you get into it. And this is how we really lose energy, because physical is one thing, but again, everything starts first within the mind and within these different absorptions and identifications, and then we lose our strength and our energy in that way.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, because I mean, it does require energy for mental activities.
Yeah, to sit down and chant, right?
Oh God, that's so much work. That's so much work.
We're tired, we can't focus. It's because we've been focusing on other things that are non-essential throughout our whole lives, and we're so habituated to continue to do that, and therefore we have no energy to actually be attentive.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else like to say something?
Damodar Maharaj says this, he gives this, he explains the mind as something that is malleable. It takes up the shape of what it's being exposed to. So if we expose it to the news, then our mind becomes news-like. Crazy.
Yeah, somebody also says, whatever you get into gets into you.
Yeah.
Whatever you get into in life, it's also getting into you. You're making an opening for something to enter into you and shape who you are. Sangat sanjayate kama. This is also in the Gita. That's why association is so important, who we associate with, because if we're in a certain association and we're getting into that association, it's also getting into us and shaping us. So we have to be selective with what I associate with, because it actually gets into me. Literally.
Yeah. Like you once said, it really stuck with me. We are what we eat. We all know that, but that does not only apply to food. It also applies to what we see, what we hear. And nobody wants to eat rotten food, but somehow or other, everybody is, watching news. And Kartik is asking you, should we stop reading news then?
Well, I'll share something interesting about that. Um, we want to sometimes be informed of what's happening, and we also want to understand the Krishna conscious perspective and everything that's happening in life, so we can remain aware. But we have to be careful that we don't get too drawn in and again absorbed, identified, lost in it all, and then we'll actually lose our clarity. So Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he was very advanced soul, and when he was taking sannyas from Srila Prabhupada, um, Prabhupada told him, you should also, with the vows that you're taking and all that you're doing, you should also read the news. I forget what it was, how often he told him to do it. Read a little bit of the news every week or so. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj was shocked, this instruction from Prabhupada, because usually we hear like, the opposite. It's all just Maya or something like that. But he was actually already evolved spiritually. He was so much evolved spiritually already. He was practically wandering India looking for a spiritual master, Gaur Govinda Maharaj. He was just walking around looking to find his guru and to take complete shelter and take sannyas. And then he came across Srila Prabhupada, and this is my guru. And then Prabhupada, gave him that initiation sannyas. And he also gave him this instruction with his vows that he should also stay a little bit informed, because he knew that he was so much, in spiritual consciousness, but he also saw the value that he stays a little bit informed so that he can help people. He can help people and be aware of the true solution to every problem. So we have to be a little careful now. From us, from my perspective, I know I'm not advanced spiritually, so I know that to get too into those things would be a distraction, the wrong kind of absorption. So a little information, staying aware, but then really taking shelter of the essence. Because the thing is, what do we do when we truly understand the problems of the world? What should we do then? We should do what we already know to do. We're going to just what? Take more shelter of our hearing. Let's be with devotees. Take more shelter of the Bhagavatam. More service, that we find ways. We have that question in our heart, Krishna, how can I serve in this situation? How can I serve you? How can I serve Guru? That's what we'll do once we finally have the full realization of material life. That's what we'll do. So we should know that, and then do that now. Even if we don't have the full realization, we take shelter of those things. Hare Krishna.
There's a question in the chat from Olga that was earlier.
Let's see. There's a question from earlier.
Hi, Krishna. I was just asking for a reminder of where it says that there's no reason to such a complex birth process for Krishna and Balaram.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that.
Okay, sorry. I was hoping you could remind us of the source that says that there's no specific reason as to why the birth of Balaram and Krishna has to be so complicated.
There's a verse. Okay, let me see. Wrote down some verse. So there's a verse earlier. I believe this is the first chapter. Nahyasya janmano hetu. With this, where Shukadev Goswami is pointing out that the birth has no cause. And the way it's explained, no cause, means that, when we ask the question, why was Krishna born in this way? Why did he arrange that Balaram comes first? You can't really ask why, because why is searching for some reason. But the reason is simply the free will, the sweet will of the Lord. You know, for a being that has complete freedom, and you ask, hey, why'd you just do that? For us, we can say that because we have, you know, why'd you do that? Well, I was feeling angry today. You know, there is some cause because of we're caught in this chain of cause and effect. But imagine for a moment a being who's completely free. Nothing forces him to do anything. Not some previous karma, some previous impression, or some built up desire from the past. But he's simply just moving out of love. He's just moving freely out of love at every moment. And he makes different arrangements and does different things. So from the material perspective, there's no cause. But from the spiritual angle, he's just a being who's free and full of compassion and love. And so every action contains that. It's just, he's being moved in that way. I don't have this verse, I have it written down here, but not listed as the actual, but there are other places where this is mentioned. I'll try to maybe find that and find some way to get it to you if you're interested. But again, the verse is na hyasya janmano hetu. If you can even type that in, sometimes you can find verses now.
Thank you. I'll try to look that up. So I appreciate the explanation, and what I gather from it is that effectively anything that Krishna does is therefore causeless, right?
Yes, in a sense, right? It's all compassion. Now, his nature is compassion. So everything he does, you could also say the cause of it is love. Or the causative is the cause of it is love, because his very nature is love. So whatever he does, he is simply drawing the living being into him and back to him out of love. But from when we speak from a material angle, we use the word no, we say no cause, causeless. And when we take it from the spiritual angle, we can say the cause of everything is his pure, loving nature.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Yeah, if nobody else has, I do have a leftover, but I'll wait.
A leftover, huh? Let's just check 1 second, Gail, to see if anybody jumps in, and then I'm happy to. No?
Ghanashyam Prabhu, can you explain causeless mercy? We often say it's due to his causeless mercy, Radhika says. And I remember you were explaining this topic one time, and you said that causeless mercy then is when something happens to us that we see as some kind of a circumstance that we cannot really do anything with, and then we're forced to surrender, and this is called causeless mercy. Is that the right understanding of this causeless mercy phenomenon?
I guess it's a tricky thing to fully understand, I would say, at least for me. But one explanation I find to be most helpful. Causeless mercy means that you take one step towards Krishna, and he takes hundreds of steps towards you. That's causeless mercy. In other words, some little sincerity, some little desire in the heart, some desire for the Lord, some approach, like in the Bhagavad Gita, even it says that those who turn to the Lord out of distress or out of suffering, out of a desire for wealth, they are also still considered Mahatmas, great souls, because they're just, whatever reason, they're just approaching the Lord. And then the Lord considers them his devotee in some respect, and he gets involved, and he now begins to reciprocate. He becomes involved in that person's life. So causeless mercy, somehow we have to make room for the meeting place between the soul, the Krishna's mercy, and a soul that just says yes to it, or accepts it, or just says thank you, or just responds to it in some compatible way. And then because of that just very slight response or opening, and Krishna again more and more. And so because it's difficult to say, of course, the Lord, out of his, if it's truly causeless, he could just decide to just give his complete mercy to someone who deserves nothing, who has no connection to any guru, and that's possible, right? So we can't deny that. But I think the best way for us to understand it is like the meeting place between the sincerity of the soul, some kind of sincerity, even if it's just a little speck or drop or some little acceptance of God. And then he showers his mercy completely. He gives everything to that jiva in the sense of, now he gives a spiritual master, he'll give his literature, he'll give his holy name. And all I did was just say yes to one thing that came, and so causeless mercy, I think, can be understood in these ways. And we can't deny that he could just completely bless somebody for no reason whatsoever. But we shouldn't just be expecting that or wanting that. We should see that, well, the more I reciprocate, the more I'm open and receptive and try to serve Krishna, then he will give also his mercy when he's pleased.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Yeah, we don't want to drift into thinking that I don't have to do anything and Krishna will bless me, or I can do anything and anyone can do anything and everyone is God, everybody's on the right path. We don't want to drift into that impersonal kind of understanding. Although Krishna is unlimited.
The danger of saying that it's completely causeless and Krishna could just choose this person and then just, do whatever he wants. The danger of that is that we start to think that it's very arbitrary, that Krishna just blesses that person for no reason and then decides to not give mercy to that, give mercy to this person, and he's just selecting randomly. But there's a way in which we should know that the more we try and the more we search for Krishna and try to serve Krishna, and he's becoming pleased, and will respond with his mercy. Bhima Prabhu, please share something with us. Nice to see you again.
Haribo,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, Ghanashyam, what a wonderful, beautiful class. I love the way that your cadence, very slow, you make a statement. It's like, reminds me of Radha's Digest. You did it precisely when I raised my hand. I wanted you to repeat the ever-present and ever-needful understanding that as we approach Krishna, he rewards us or approaches us accordingly. So this so-called causeless mercy may seem to be causeless, but Krishna never will. I mean, he never will come onto us unless we are open. If our heart is open, if we're turned away, if we don't want to. I mean, that's how we left the spiritual world. We turned away. So Krishna allowed us to. That was also his causeless mercy. He allowed us to have our so-called freedom in the material world. But as we become exhausted and realize, turn back to Krishna. And so I just wanted you to very quickly, perhaps elucidate that point.
Thank you, Prabhu, for sharing that. Yeah, it makes me think too of Prabhupada, what he said on 2 different occasions. At one point he told his disciples that, they asked Prabhupada, what is our qualification for having a bona fide guru? And Prabhupada said, you have no qualification. I made your qualification. Okay, so that's one thing, right? But on another time, when they asked Prabhupada the same question, different words, but the same question, how did we become so blessed to have a true guru when other people are being cheated by gurus? And Prabhupada responded that time by saying, because you have accepted and others have not. So, these two things are working together. It's there's this mercy that seems to be just complete mercy, but still something. Why does one person accept it and one person not? There's something in the soul that's ready, that wants it, that longs for it. Maybe it's very subtle. Maybe we're not even aware that that's what's happening within me. But that little sincerity that just says, yes, internally, yes, I accept. This is nice. This is good for me. Thank you. Whatever you want to call that thing, faith, gratitude, acceptance. And then Krishna, as soon as he sees that, then he'll give everything. He'll give the whole path. Now it still has to unfold for us. We still have to go that path. And he'll reciprocate accordingly as we continue to just become more sincere and serve. And so that verse in the Gita, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly, as you were mentioning. And that's where we need to be. We need to understand that and follow that, and not just expect to be some recipient of, for no reason, I'm going to be blessed one day. I hope for that. And we can hope, but we also have to do our part, and Krishna will respond.
Rajavihari Prabhu, would you like to read what you put in the chat box? A very helpful point.
Okay, if you want me to. There is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord. It completely depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. We cannot demand the Lord to be present before our vision, just as we cannot demand the sun to rise whenever we like. The sun rises out of its own accord. So also the Lord is pleased to be present out of his causeless mercy. One should simply await the opportune moment to go on discharging his prescribed duties in the devotional service of the Lord.
Very nice.
Yeah, Rajavihari Prabhu nailed it. We cannot demand, wait for our
opportunity. I didn't know anything. I just opened up Database and found this.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Very welcome.
Would anyone else like to? Henry Prabhu, would you like to say anything? You're muted. You're muted, Prabhu. Oh.
I'm really enjoying this class. It's just perfect. It's an incredibly wonderful way to spend Gaur Purnima. Thank you so much to all the devotees here, and particularly Ghanashyam.
Great to see you, Henry Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Radhika.
Hare Krishna. I'm not sure if we have a question. Do we? Okay. So Ghanashyam Prabhu, you had mentioned, you said this statement that no one has really ever changed or transformed simply from learning from their mistakes, something along those lines, if I got it correctly. And so, there's often that phrase, just learn, people learn from their mistakes. But in this case, we're saying that there's something more than that it's a change in consciousness that's required. And so can you elaborate on that? Because sometimes, like, we could say, like, change in consciousness, like, part of the transformation is, our sadhana, doing the things to uplift ourselves as we would do as devotees. But sometimes we see in non-devotee communities, sometimes that people are transforming more than we might even see. So within our own communities, and they're not chanting 16 rounds, they're not reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So there seems to be something more than just the sadhana aspect. Could you elaborate or correct me if I've perceived these things incorrectly?
That's a great question. Thank you. Other people who are non-devotees or not even religious, you see that they also overcome certain things within themselves and find certain solutions that help them. And because these are the three modes of nature. And there are ways from going from ignorance and passion to connecting to goodness and finding some relief and some little solution in your life that may help you get through, or may give you some insight. The mode of goodness is a material mode, but it also is very enlightening in a sense. And so some people who are not even devotees, are not even in spiritual life at all, maybe they don't identify with that. Maybe they say, I don't believe in God, but they still can tune in to certain truths and find, come to a place of acceptance within their heart or forgiveness to another person. And we think, wow, even without sadhana, without all these things, they're connecting to something, because the goodness, there's a certain purity in goodness. But we should understand so the way that works is you may come and arrive at something in life that has a certain, that really helps you in some way. But because the mode of goodness also is never completely pure, and you can't stay there in it. So as life goes on, rolls on, and then association again changes, and then now I'm around this situation and these people, and again other modes get back in, and then we fall back down into maybe the previous habits, or maybe just another life comes, and then the situation is different, or I get mixed up in something in life, and then suddenly I want revenge. Now I'm back in a lower mode. And so it's true that people can arrive at certain realizations and understandings that help them in life. But because there's no transcendent energy, they can't completely be lifted out of it. So in Krishna consciousness, we should want both of these things. We should want, ways that I make mistakes and I learn from them, and I do whatever I can from my present level of consciousness. We should choose the mode of goodness. At the same time, we should understand that choosing the mode of goodness again and again never really leads to transcendence. I actually have to take shelter of the transcendental energy. I actually have to take shelter of the name of God, which is completely pure. I have to take shelter of the pure teachings of the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. This is from a whole nother category of life. And if I become receptive to that higher energy, then we'll see a complete change taking place, a total reversal of life, a total transformation of life. And so the example you gave, surely, there are people in this world that are doing good things, and that even without Krishna consciousness have, like you said, sometimes they put devotees to shame. They have some, sangha or some association, and it's just very healthy. Mode of goodness means healthy. So a person can connect to those things. A person can learn certain principles. They tune in to certain higher principles of the mode of goodness, and they appreciate that, and they see how it's benefiting them in life, and their life becomes more healthy. But you can't sustain it in the material world. And also the mode of goodness is never completely just the mode of goodness. There's also slight touch of passion and ignorance in it, which means it is shifting, it is moving, it is not stable. But the platform of Vishuddhasattva, pure goodness, that is just permanent, and nothing else is mixed in it. So if we associate with that, then we're completely transformed, that we're on the path of transformation. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Ghanashyam.
Prabhu. Thank you.
Yeah. Andrea, would you like to reflect?
Do you want me to finish it off since we're going on?
Yes, finish it off.
So, Hare Krishna, Ghanashyam Das Prabhu. My biggest takeaway is actually right at the very
Andrea, would you like to
of your talk
reflect?
when you.
The Pujaris made an announcement that the class.
Do you want me to finish it off since we're going on?
Finish it off. Sorry about that. Hold on.
Hare Krishna, Ghanashyam Das Prabhu. My biggest takeaway was right in the very beginning when you said, if we can hear, and again, I'm paraphrasing you, if we can hear and have in our heart the appearance of Krishna or God on this earth, then we can hope to not have to appear on this earth again. And that was extremely powerful for me, because it's that whole idea of when we are celebrating these appearance days, not just of Lord Chaitanya, but like of all these like exalted personalities, that's the purpose of it, is to be in that space so that we don't have to appear on this earth again. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, that's Bhagavad Gita. Tyaktva deham punar janma. That you will give up your own process of birth and death by absorbing and understanding the birth of the Lord and his activities.
The Pujaris made an announcement that the deity curtain will be a little while longer.
So we can take.
We're going to start Guru Push. Okay, so we're going to stop the class. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri
Ghanashyam
Chaitanya
Prabhu
Mahaprabhu
ki
ki
jai.
jai.
Happy
Hare
Guru
Krishna.
Purnima, everybody. Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Thanks everyone for participating.
Hare
Happy
Krishna. Thank you.
to see everybody. Hare Krishna.